The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. WealthBuilders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Welcome to episode 99 of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, and I'm joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Chris. Good to be with you again. And you know what? It's almost exactly 1 year since the lockdown. We finally got ourselves a little roadmap out of the mire we've been in, the tragedy of how things have been for so many people during the course of the year. But you know, one thing's for sure, even though we have been in lockdown, some people have been making tremendous strides in their wealth. And one of those is our guest today, Mr. Mark Stokes.
Yeah, Mark is a good friend of WealthBuilders, and I really enjoyed the conversation with Mark, which we'll be sharing in a few moments. And we're talking specifically today about quite remarkable feat, which was how Mark managed to double his pension in the space of just 24 months. And he'd been working in a long corporate career. And like so many people, Kevin, they get to a point where they just decide that enough is enough and it's time to embark on the next phase. And that was certainly a phase that Mark embraced. And we'll hear all about the tremendous things that have been happening since he made that decision.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a good story. And everybody, whatever they are on their wealth building journey, there's a catalyst somewhere. You know, something which is another ROI, Chris. You know, I'm a big fan of ROIs, a reason to overcome inertia. That was big for me with the tragic death of my father very young, and prompted me to, you know, try and get wealthy as early as possible. So the catalyst, obviously, for Mark was very different from mine, a whole different thing, but still revolving around family. And, you know, I know he was also touched by somebody's early death. There's a friend of his he often talks about, called Pete, who was on the verge of joining Mark on the new chapter in his life, but unfortunately he collapsed and died, didn't make it. And the tragic consequence of that was the pension for his spouse was halved, and no legacy for the children. So, you know, he's very deeply passionate now about pensions and doing the right thing, as you'll hear. And you'll hear that it's very rare that you see somebody get so passionate about something, they even start to write about it, and they want to create a whole movement around almost educating people to discover the secret that was so well hidden that he discovered when he was ready to find it. So it'd be great to hear from Mark and debrief, you know, some thoughts from him at the end.
Okay, let's head on over to our conversation today with Mr. Mark Stokes. Mark, a very warm welcome to Wealth Talk today.
Thank you, Christian. How are you, sir?
I'm excellent. And it's fantastic to have you back, Mark. I was just looking back through the archives. It was actually Wealth Talk number 18 when you appeared and talked about the SSAS Pension. And we're now nearly at 100 episodes. So how time flies.
100 already, is it? Well done. Well, you're doing some great work out there. So well done.
Thanks so much, Mark. Now, I know many of our listeners will be familiar with your name, and, you know, you've got a great story to tell. Today, we're talking about quite some achievement, which is how you managed to double your pension within 2 years. So we'll come into the details of that in a moment. But for anyone listening, perhaps who hasn't had the pleasure of, you know, your company online or offline, would you mind just giving our listeners a brief introduction?
Yeah, Mark Stokes, live in Surrey, just outside of Guildford. Been in business for 25 odd years. Retired in my mid-40s in 2015. And since then, I've taken that construction and real estate and investment knowledge over those 25 years and set up multiple businesses involved in property, education, and, of course, SSAS Pensions as well.
So, like many people listening, probably, Mark, you were in a corporate job for many years, and you decided it was time for a change. So what was the catalyst exactly?
Yeah, so look, 25 years is a long time in corporate life. I only had 2 employers during that 25-year period. I probably had 50 or 60 roles, and that took me across 4 continents, 33 countries, And that takes its toll after a while. There was a lot of responsibility. And I was on the board of 7 different companies at the time, back in late 2014. I also have 4 children. I'm now married to my wife for 22 years. And the reality was there would have been an 8th company and a 9th and a 10th that I would have been a board director of. And the more successful I was in corporate life, the less time I was spending with my children and, with the family and the people that I love. And I had to draw a line under that. I had to make I was going to say a tough call, but I had to make a call. I had to decide whether I wanted to continue down that path or whether I wanted to focus on my relationship with the ones that I love. So I sat down with my chief exec in late 2014 and just leveled with her. I said, this is where my life's going, and this is what I'd like to do. I always wanted to be a good leaver, leaving the corporate environment. And indeed, it did take, best part of 7 or 8 months to leave corporate life, and quite a heady time that was as well. But so it was spending more time with my family, looking at long range horizons, and surrounding myself with the people that I care about.
Well, I'd love to know actually kind of what happened after you made that decision. So for that 8-month period, as you were almost exiting a career that you'd been in for so long, I imagine some people listening now, that's a bit of a kind of scary thought. So what were sort of some of the steps that you needed to put in place to be able to sort of move on to the next phase?
Well, it's a really great question. The freedom for me was not when I left corporate life. It wasn't 8 months before I left corporate life when I sat down with my chief exec. It was a month before that. When I decided, I sat down with my wife, we had a chat, and we decided that the time was right for me to exit corporate life. The moment I made that decision, that was freedom, the likes of which I really hadn't experienced in all that corporate life. From that point on, the company was working for me. The company was, employing me and managing my exit strategy, although they didn't realize it at the time. So I knew that I was on another path. For the 25 years before, it had always been, my entire life pretty much. I'd ridden to some pretty heady ranks around the world. The whole thing turned. It was a mindset shift. It turned on its axis, and now the company was working for me. I have to say, over those 8 or 9 months until I did leave, I probably put just as many, if not more, hours into the role. It was very demanding. I had to merge, acquire, and also shed a lot of businesses and a lot of companies. I was a corporate troubleshooter as well. So, but yeah, that was key. So that was the trigger. Because I was so absorbed in doing the right thing for my employer and leaving, it was pretty clear for me that I needed to build. I needed to design a parachute. I needed to put the parachute on before I jumped out the corporate jet. That's how I would use the analogy. And that took a while to design. And I think all of us, when you're leaving whatever form of employment, there's always that pause, that hesitation. It could be confidence, but how are you going to repurpose the skills you've got? And where I do see a lot of people struggle is they don't recognize the skills that they've worked a lifetime to curate and nurture. If you've been in business 5 or 10 years, if you've run a business, if you've been an employee, if you're an accountant, whatever your background is, you've got some core skills there. Don't cast those, dash those on the rocks and think that, I'm going into another world of entrepreneurship and they're now not relevant. They absolutely are relevant. Take those with you, build on them, recognize them, repurpose them, absolutely. But build a very clear, coherent strategy very quickly. So there's some key steps and mindset shifts that I went through.
Yeah, such an important lesson that really is. So what exactly did you step into then? So on that first day of freedom, Mark, were you just sitting at home watching TV, or were you straight into, projects?
Yeah, well, I don't rest on my laurels. Anybody who knows me well will understand that. My background way back when I did my degree was in construction management. I've been involved in real estate and property for all of those 25 years, power stations, data centers, highly resilient structures. So, with over 3 million square feet of property under my belt that I deployed, it probably wouldn't surprise anybody that I went into property. I'd been very well looked after in corporate life. But like many people, my cost base in my home life had also increased as well. So I took some pretty clear measures to reduce my cost base, to increase my interest in property portfolio, to increase cash flow. So that was my first priority. How can I increase cash flow so I have a very resilient asset base to offset my previous employment, PAYE and bonuses and all the fringe benefits? I knew it had to be in a highly tax efficient environment. So my mandate to myself was to take control of my personal economy, take control of everything. And I started with my tax position, and I had a very basic self-assessment tax position. I had a singular income stream. It was very high, but it was a singular income stream. So I set to work on looking at the structure for my assets, where my personal return would come from. Would that be in dividends? Would that be in salary, mortgageability? Just putting the right framework and tapestry around my personal economy. And that happened relatively quickly. Most of my interests at that time in those first few years were about property, and they would be in buy-to-lets, HMOs. We did a lot, 15 or 20 buy-to-lets and HMOs in the first 6 months. But I've been involved in hundreds of millions, if not billions of US dollars of transactions over the years. So I was naturally drawn to maybe some of the larger, more complex transactions, commercial to residential conversions, land developments. So that got me working very closely with high net worth private investors, with the banks and with larger deals. And another catalyst for me as well was I've always been involved in joint ventures. My good friend and partner, Nigel Green. Nigel and I have been involved in joint ventures for 22 years. And in fact, my first joint venture was back in 1992. I worked for a large US contractor called Peter Kiewit and Sons. And the contract I was responsible for was on Lock and Dam 16 on the Mississippi in Muscatine, Iowa, about $30 million refurbishment in the winter of 92, 93. And that was a joint venture between Peter Kiewit and Sons and the US Army Corps of Engineers, which was rather an interesting clash of cultures, I can assure you. So joint ventures, not going it alone, but understanding the real power behind working with in a collaborative manner was really important.
Yeah. Now, one of the big bonuses, of course, of a long corporate career is pillar number 2, which is pensions. So let's come on to this topic, because I know it's an area that you managed to leverage, to quite some effect. So what was your relationship like with your pension for many years, Mark?
Very, very clear on my relationship with my pension. It was about a 3-minute experience once a year of picking a letter off a doormat, looking at my pension statement and thinking, well, that's not very good. Hopefully it'll be better next year. That was my pension management strategy. Not particularly proud of it. But that was my pension strategy for a quarter of a century. But I come back to that mandate I gave to myself and to my wife that we would take control of our personal economy at the end of 2014, 2015. And that included all aspects. And, my pension I knew was one of the largest bank accounts that I had, but I didn't have access to. Had absolutely no idea of SIPs and SSASs at that time and alternative structures. But I was like a dog with a bone there. I needed to find a solution. I worked very quickly, but I like pressure. I did a lot of due diligence, and in doing that due diligence, which took 6-7 months to work out what a SSAS was, what a SIP was, looking at all the options, talking to people, it was very clear that there wasn't really one place to go at that time. WealthBuilders didn't exist then, SSAS Alliance didn't exist then, and there was only fragments of information out there. So I drew that together, and through my experiences, decided on SSAS. That was the thing to do way back then. It was only after I'd set my SSAS up in 2016 that I first met Kevin. So Kevin and I have had a long-running relationship and friendship over all things SSAS and wealth creation ever since then. But setting up a SSAS for the first time was a big step for me, Christian, in taking control of that personal economy. I wanted to challenge tradition. I was ready to challenge tradition and taking control as being a trustee. And we have 4 trustees in our SSAS, myself, Nigel, and our respective wives. That was a very big catalyst for us. And having taken control, I wanted a very clear mandate. I wanted to play by all the rules, play by all the options that HMRC allowed me to do so. It was invigorating, to say the least.
So let's talk about what happened over the next 2 years. How did you manage to double that pension?
Yeah, so we flew out the blocks. To be honest, we put in a number of offers for commercial property. It won't surprise you. Our first property that we acquired was it's 3 5-story offices side by side in the Midlands. And we acquired that property on a conditional basis, subject to getting planning. And we duly got planning, and we converted that to 18 apartments. So we acquired the commercial property in the SSAS. We got planning for residential. Before the development happened, we decided to sell that from our SSAS. So that created a nice return for the SSAS. And in fact, we still hold those 18 apartments in another limited company. So that was the first thing that we did. Then we were back in cash in our SSAS, so we went shopping again, and we found a small property actually. It was to let in Colchester in Essex. It's called Portal Precinct. Now, we weren't really looking for a property to let, but here's a bit of a top tip for anybody who is involved in commercial property or wants to find more. Not everybody knows that they want to sell a property. If there is distress, if somebody's got a vacant property, then could they, and it's out for let, might they want to sell it? And that's exactly what we did. Went and had a look. We liked it. We said, look, we're not going to let this, but we might be interested to buy it if you've got any more assets like this. It turns out that the gentleman was in his mid-70s. He did indeed own the other 4 properties around this property to let. He wanted £1 million for all 5 properties. Clearly, we didn't want to pay £1 million for those 5 properties, so we got a great deal there. We paid about $610,000 for those 5 properties. We acquired it on a conditional basis, subject to planning. So we kept the 5 commercial properties as commercial, but we wanted to get full planning permission for 3 apartments in the uppers, in the attic, if you like, in the stockroom and storerooms. And we also did what most people now would know as airspace rights. This was a forerunner to airspace rights. We went into planning to put in a bridge, if you like, to put in an extension across a utility entrance. So we built that. We then refreshed all the leases on the property, brought new parties in, extended lease terms, got a commercial valuation on it. Clearly, at this stage, we'd developed the residential properties outside of the SSAS, and we held and still do hold the 5 commercial properties inside the SSAS. So that was absolutely phenomenal for us. We got a great valuation on the 3 residential that sit outside of the SSAS. So, yeah, it took me 25 years to contribute into my corporate pension or pensions, and all the returns that compounded over 25 years. And, we doubled my pension in 24 months by doing primarily the second transaction. Absolutely staggering. But the most important thing to me, Christian, was the freedom of operating under my own license. I could control the fees, and we were buying in cash. That freedom meant more to Nigel and myself and our families than the money itself in many respects, because what it gave us a hunting license. It gave us that license to operate and that empowerment to run a significant part of our personal economy that had, probably through my own naivety over 25 years, had been out of reach. And that was a game changer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, congratulations on achieving that. I know you've done so much more since then, but it's interesting because Kevin and I ran a webinar last night, and we were talking about the 7 freedoms which drive people. And we know financial freedom is the initial driver for many people, but it's really time. It's just having that time to do the things that you want. And in what other ways has your SSAS transformed your life, would you say? What else is it now allow you to do that you couldn't do before?
Where do I start? So many different areas. We're just about to use a loan back to acquire a commercial property. So, and we'll be doing a 3 tranche loan back. So we'll be buying the land with tranche 1, and then doing the build with tranche 2, and then the fit out tranche 3. So using quite an innovative way of using loan backs. And that will sit as an asset in our limited company for many years to come. So a loan back is one. I mentioned that it was my 4 children. I wanted to spend more time with my 4 children, and I now work predominantly from home. I wanted to instill in them that there was a different way to operate. I found, the wonderful joy of being a father and bringing up children. It's not easy, and if somebody ever did write a book, I haven't read it, so I've had to learn by mistakes and things. And one of the great things that a SSAS has done for me is it's help illustrate to my children to look ahead in life. It's very difficult for a 10 or a 15-year-old young person to think when they're 30, when they're 40, when they're 50. That's 3 or 4 times their current lifespan ahead of them. So making that connection and looking ahead. And I think many entrepreneurs, they focus on the legacy, but they forget the custodianship of the legacy. And that's one of the most satisfying things that I think Nigel and I do with our SSAS and with our company. All of our 8 children between us, Nigel's got 4 and I've got 4. All of our 8 children, they're all shareholders in our company. They're all destined, should they wish, to be trustees of the SSAS. I can take my children and go and have a latte in a cafe, and we own the building. Our SSAS owns the property, and they start to see pensions in a very different context. And that's incredibly powerful because it resonates with them. They're not going to understand a spreadsheet, but they start to understand those, the thought process, the cogs start turning for them. So that there's many permutations here in terms of legacy, the custodianship, the connection, the financial return. The cost of each transaction has fallen through the floor for us, which is great. We've got access to liquidity at the lowest possible rates. We're doing a very large loan back at the moment, the largest one we've done, and that'll be at about 1.2% cost of funds per annum. And we see many development transactions are more like 1% per month. So it's an absolute game changer in so many ways.
Well, you mentioned there obviously the importance of passing on those lessons to your family, and you've written 5 books, Mark. So one of those books was titled Advice to Your Younger Self. So tell us a bit more about that and of course the other books and what led you to write.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I'm going to take you back to when I was about 9 or 10 years old. There was a series of books called The Hardy Boys. For anybody who's in their 40s or 50s, they may remember The Hardy Boys. And I was always an avid reader. My mum and dad always encouraged me to read. So I've always absorbed books with a passion. So over the 35 years, it's been the kind of itch that I wanted to scratch, really, to always imagine myself, the smell of a book and the crispness of the pages. I just always wanted to be an author. But over 25 years of business life, I guess it battered me down a bit and suppressed. I didn't know what to write on, didn't have the time or the energy, and didn't know how. But when I left corporate life, it was right. Okay, let's focus on the things I really want to do. So I am going to write a book. Now I need to find a subject. And the first book was Commercial to Residential Conversions. I felt very comfortable given my 3 million square feet of experience in doing those type of developments. And then SSAS Pensions was a natural second book because I'd done the research, my own due diligence. Well, if I was finding it so difficult to find this information, then surely there are other people who might benefit from reading a book on that basis. And then Advice to Your Younger Self I was looking for a give back. I've been approached. I set up something called Young Entrepreneur about 3.5-4 years ago. And a lot of people had said, "Oh, you should do a course on that, Mark. You should mentor children and things like that." And that wasn't really what I wanted to do. Imagine a child coming on a course. Well, I don't want to take money off children. And when does a child want to come on a course? Saturday afternoon when they could be at ballet or football or half term. Nah, it just didn't feel right. So I came up with this concept of, and this ended up being Advice to Your Younger Self of, no matter where you are in life, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, if you were to take yourself back, given what you know now, to when you were, say, 13, 14, 15, what 2 or 3 pieces of advice do you wish somebody had, put their arm around your shoulder and just whispered a couple of things in your ear? What advice do you wish you'd been given? And I felt I wasn't qualified to write a book of that magnitude. So I reached out to 48 other people who I know, like, and trust, and asked them each to write a chapter of that book. So there are 49 different perspectives from people from all walks of life. So I hope it's a force for good. I hope the lessons that are enshrined in those pages will compound, not just for the 49 people that wrote a chapter, but for all the thousands that have got the book. And hopefully they will pass those wisdom and the wisdom contained in the book to the next generation. And all the proceeds go to good causes as well. So it's a give back to society in hopefully so many different ways.
Yeah. And I know giving back is important to you, and there's other ways that you're giving back as well. Also have to mention one of your other books that you co-wrote with one of our members, Louise Wrighton, the SSAS Superstars, and I think that came out was that 2020?
Yeah, September 2020. Oh, Louise is absolutely fantastic, and she did some amazing work of, not just interviewing 10 SSAS trustees, many of which are members of the Wealth Builders community. Not just interviewing them, but the way she drew out the lessons learnt, the takeaways at the end of each chapter. It was just an absolute privilege to work with Louise. She's a great personal friend. And it just shows that, collaboration takes you in many different ways. And I absolutely love it.
Now, of course, Wealth Builders sits on, three core values of good education, good support, and good connections. And community, we know, is really important when it comes to wealth building. And you've created, along with Nigel, the SSAS Alliance. So tell us, how did that come about?
Well, it came about I think it was the summer of 2017. So, nearly 3.5, 4 years ago now. And SSAS wasn't very well known at that time. And we'd created a lot of knowledge. We were starting to do some great things, and our echo community was growing as well. But I saw there was a place in the world where like-minded people focused on SSAS and growing their wealth. This was nothing to do with property at that time. It was just purely people interested in SSAS, could come together with the objective of sharing information, knowledge. Nobody's competing with each other, just competing with what you're capable of. And everybody rises together. And we're now over 4,000 members in the community. And these are people who are entrepreneurial. They've taken control of their personal economy. They collaborate, and they have all challenged tradition. They have all decided that 3 minute a year pension management strategy of picking a statement off the doormat each Christmas and thinking, that's not very good, hopefully it'll be better next year, is not the life they want to lead. So it's been wonderful. And the volume of interest, the type of people, and that the law of reciprocity, I think, lives very bright every day in that community.
Yeah. And, of course, before lockdown, we had some great events and, attended many of those London events where you had fantastic turnouts and also up in Leeds. I mean, all across the country, SSAS Alliance events were taking place. And it's almost like a secret club, isn't it? It's like, the unknown secret weapon of wealth building, and stories and sharings were just incredible. So well done for bringing everyone together there. And of course, now that's moved online, and a thriving Facebook group, which, where should someone go if they want to obviously connect with the SSAS Alliance, Mark?
Yeah, so if they go to the SSAS Alliance Facebook group, just a couple of simple questions there. We'll let you in, and that's it's a real safe environment for people to understand what SSAS is. We, Kevin and I, do a monthly explorer session for those exploring SSAS for the first time, who want to understand, the right type of questions to ask. A SSAS isn't for everybody, but once you get your head around it, and if you ensure that you prepare to take on the accountability and responsibility, we just see people flourish. It's just absolutely wonderful. So SSAS Alliance Facebook group, and we've got our SSAS Alliance conference on 25th of March. It's just a wonderful growing community.
Yeah. Now, obviously now reaching financial independence, Mark, and being able to give back, what are the next goals for you? Where do you see things in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I see our SSAS being very key, to be honest. Taking the theme of being in control of our economy. We're acquiring, as an example, a piece of land at the moment, and we're going to be doing a new build and commercial property. Now, we're doing that with a loan back. So as our SSAS grows, our capacity to do loan backs grows, which means our capacity to acquire more property in the SSAS or outside of the SSAS grows. It means we create a greater level of independence on how we fund deals, how we collaborate with others. So gradually, that acquisition of a diverse array of assets just grows. I guess many people will know me for our commercial to residential conversions. We do a lot of big developments between sort of 5 million and 20 million GDV, which is great. But I think what strategically about pre-COVID, actually, about 18 months ago, we looked at our asset portfolio and decided that we'd like to start a diversification program and bring in not just apartments, but new build houses, because we felt, growing families, back gardens, car parking space to park the car on the front driveway. And I'm pleased we did, really. So new build houses are an additional part. We also have an incubator fund as well. So Nigel and I put a proportion of our time and our capital to one side, and we invest that capital in management teams. And that's what we've always done over 30 years of mentoring people. I've mentored people since about 1996 and mentored businesses. So we're increasingly investing sometimes our capital, quite often our time, and becoming shareholders and board members of certain businesses where we back management teams. And I absolutely love that. Get a real kick out of that, seeing talent rise to the surface and seeing wonderful people achieve absolutely magnificent things. It actually doesn't get any better than that.
It's been very inspiring listening to you, Mark. And I guess, again, for people listening now, just the power of leveraging multiple different assets, building wealth across multiple pillars. You've talked about property, leveraging your pension, joint ventures, but, it gives you that peace of mind, that security, that foundation to build upon. Any final lessons that you would like to share?
There are so many. I think everything we do is structured for assured outcomes, starting with the end in mind. So I used, 3 S's: structure, structure, structure. Property's wonderful, but actually nobody came out the womb wanting property. It's what property gives you. Property is a vehicle to creating wealth and creating security and resilience. It's how you structure the acquisition of those assets. So we invest in businesses. Obviously, I've got IP with the books, how we structure property, how tax efficient we are, capital allowances, all these things. It revolves around how we structure the deal, how we structure the business, how we structure our investments. That's probably one of the core areas of experience that I've gathered over all those years, and we put that to good effect. So if people really do want to accelerate their journey and solidify and really concentrate their wealth and growth, focus on the structure. Make sure that structure is highly tax efficient, resilient, and protected. I think that would be my closing bit of advice.
Mark, thank you very much. Apart from the SSAS Alliance Facebook group, if anyone wants to connect with you online, where's the best place for them to head?
Yep, so I run Equa Academy, EQUA Academy, Equa Academy. If they go to Equa Academy Facebook group, direct message me on Facebook. They're probably the 2 areas there. So that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Thanks so much for sharing with us today, Mark.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks again, Christian.
Okay, lots of good points for us to discuss there, Kevin. I hope you enjoyed listening to that.
Well, I really did enjoy it, and I learned a lot more about Mark that sometimes your friendship doesn't dive into, particularly his feelings around his family, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But look, listen to the lesson in there. Crumbs, 25 years, pensions wilderness, 25 years to build, double in as many months. That's just incredible, isn't it? That's almost an acceleration you just don't expect. No wonder he's excited about the subject of SSAS and why he's such a keen sharer.
Yeah, well, talking of sharing, we have had another review on iTunes, actually, which I would love to read out. And this review says, I've been listening to this podcast for just over 12 months and really enjoy how they translate and educate complex issues into something much easier to understand. The podcast has also been brilliant for supporting my mindset and growth. Plus, they have a great balance of interesting and relevant guests. Thank you for the great podcast. So thank you for the great review.
Well, you know what's interesting, although we don't get reviews here, I did have a phone call today from somebody who said, I'm just loving being in your Clubhouse room. It's like, oh, right, okay, that's good. Because obviously Clubhouse, the kind of new social media phenomenon where people can talk to us. So rather than the podcast, they just listen. They can jump on and somebody's very nice and complimentary saying, I just love how you translate complicated things, how you're very passionate about your subject matter and how you're so inclusive. And all the things we hear in WealthBuilders, don't we really? So good to hear that what we're doing is consistent across all media channels, Chris.
Yeah, I popped in for the first time as well this week to have a listen to you because I'm not an iPhone user, so I've been one of those people on the sidelines. But I see we've nearly got 1,000 followers in Clubhouse, so that's good to see.
Yeah, I'm very pleased about that. And so we'll keep going with that. In fact, Mark and I do a Clubhouse room every Friday. If you're interested, we call it SSAS Alliance SSAS Weekly. So essentially, it's anything to do with SSAS. You can jump in and ask me or Mark questions, and we've collaborated an awful lot, really, on not just SSAS. We discovered each other some while ago, and I think he had a bit of a misstep, as he talks about in his pension, where he chose the wrong trustee originally. You've got to have a professional. And I think he laughingly says, at least to me, I'm not sure if he said it on the podcast, that they were moving at sort of seismic speed, very slow, in other words. And he wanted to move much more quickly. And then he discovered, my skills. And I've been delighted to be working with him and with his partner, Nigel. And what's interesting from their perspective, of course, is, it's really a family thing, which is the essence of his story, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's pull out some of the lessons then, and always begins with the why. And for Mark, that was very clear. He wanted more time with his family. He really wanted to take control. And Mark talks about, being in control of his personal economy. And that's a mandate, as he says in his own words, that he stood by very, very firmly.
It's a language he uses a lot, and I think it makes perfect sense. And certainly as he has now gone on to, not just do SSAS, but and to make his pension work with his business, which is called the Equa Group, which is a great property development company. But he's gone on to write about it and teach it, and that enthusiasm just shines over, doesn't it? So, good to hear what he's been up to, and good to hear that he's been successful throughout the lockdown as well. So, but I love the family nature of what they're doing and the original catalyst, but also that he's got the freedom to spend time with the family now and working on his own terms. Definitely, as far as SSAS is concerned, he says, if I kind of buy a piece of property, I get the rent comes back to the family, and then the growth in the SSAS comes back to the family, and you can involve the family members in that. And I think in due course, as the kids get older, they'll be involved too. So a true family wealth business, as we advocate in the Wealth Builder Group, Chris.
Yeah. So the freedom, which we know, there's different types of freedom, but almost always, I should say, is linked to time freedom. And of course, once you have the time to really focus on the things that you want and building that legacy. And just also as that SSAS grows, then Mark is no longer as reliant on the banks and those sources of funding, which, perhaps he used to have to rely on a bit more.
And more important than ever in property, of course, is, we had that in the lockdown, banks not lending as much. We had it in the credit crunch in 2008. So, it's never good to be completely reliant on any one source of anything. So banks can call money in, and there's no worse place to be as a developer than the banking calling the money in, because, if they call the money in, the value of your property, if it's unfinished, is almost worthless. So, well, certainly worth a lot less So consequently, having a wide range of funding options, including using their SAS to either buy property or facilitate the buying of property, planning applications, conversions. They just become super smart at being able to be creative. And, when did pensions ever get creative? I mean, who's ever had a pension statement and saying, I'm feeling more creative today? They never are. They're never smarter when they just get statements. But, Mark and Nigel, so strong now in their knowledge, probably knows more than most professional trustees and certainly most advisors. So, hats off to him. And I'm so proud that on our journey, as he was looking to share the movement with SAS Alliance, him and Nigel founded that. They invited me after a year or so to join the board to try and help take it to another level, which we, in fairness, we've done. We've got a thriving community, many members who are participating in the bi-weekly masterminds, and there will be events coming up soon, site visits and conferences, and talking about the conference. Chris, need to do a quick plug for that because free. As always, we try and give great value in WealthBuilders, and we've got a conference on the 25th of March, which is all day, but you don't have to listen all day. You can tune in and it will be recorded for members, which is all the creativity that you can bring and other people bring in case studies and expert knowledge from other speakers, including myself. I'll be speaking on one or two things. In that conference, the SAS Alliance conference, Thursday, the 25th of March, from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So tune in if you're interested.
And our very own Paul Brooks, our WealthBuilders SAS director, will be on the panel as well. He'll be speaking, as will one of our members, Louise Wrighton, who Mark obviously talks about co-authoring the SAS Superstars book with, and one of our wealth coaches, Carol Robinson. So, that's a good day to look forward to.
Yeah, and you want to know, I tell you what made me laugh more than anything else. Louise is hosting a panel of female SAS members, okay? And there's, that's a really interesting thing because, interestingly enough, those taking control of their pension, only 25% of our SAS clients are female. So 75% men, 25% female. She's doing something about that big style. And her group that she's set up for this panel session is called Girls Just Want to Have Funds. What do you think of that?
I like it. We've got to have a little bit of fun having you on the way, on the journey.
Yeah. I noticed you're sitting on the sidelines. So you're the sidelines of Clubhouse, you're in the sidelines of the conference. It's probably best you did some work, Chris, don't you think?
I'm too busy producing these podcasts each week. The final point I want to touch on, I think it's a really important one, is that Mark hasn't done this by himself, and nobody builds wealth by themselves. And he talks about Nigel Green, who is obviously his business partner, but understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and they are such a great partnership. And for those that know Nigel, he's definitely the more detailed guy. And when we talk about wealth dynamics, he would be on the steely side on the left, and Mark perhaps a bit more on the creative side. But it's really important. And Mark talked about as well, when he was leaving his employment, to repurpose your skills. And we talk about this a lot, but it's a point that really shouldn't be overlooked.
Absolutely right. I mean, so the critical thing there he stresses, and I think I agree with it 100%, is when you have built all of those previous skills, then you must bring them with you on your wealth journey. You don't leave them behind and become, in inverted commas, a newbie. As many people do from a corporate life, they get involved in any kind of assets, like property, for example, and they start life as a newbie and they forget the incredible insights, the value, the relationships, the skills that they had in their previous world of building value, but maybe not earning the value in terms of asset, but certainly creating value for others. And that value creation skill is definitely worth bringing with you. Just stick it in your rucksack, pack it on your back, and make sure you don't overlook that mountain of value that you're standing on. But because you're standing right on top of it, it just isn't within your field of vision.
Okay, so we hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation today, and we return next week, Kevin, for the big 100. So bring your party poppers along to that one.
I'm looking forward to it, Chris. And it feels like everything's gone very smoothly and we've really enjoyed the journey together. So I think we should have a bit of a celebration. Who knows what we have in store for you? But until next time, my friend, see ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the WealthBuilders membership site to help you create, build and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.